I have enjoyed serving the cotton industry and agriculture very much. Agriculture is certainly a love of mine and so important to what our society does. I do want to mention I'm actually a graduate of West Texas. It was State University then, and this is great to see this facility here. I'm really kind of proud to have it here, but one thing I'm really glad that WT's doing is they're putting a lot of emphasis on dryland agriculture and limited water and doing a lot of research and doing that. And I'm glad they're at the forefront of it. This is the right area, and I'm proud that they're doing that and working in conjunction with Texas Tech and A&M and Kansas State, Oklahoma State to make this as good as we can. As RN has mentioned, the aquifer, we've had 80 years of pretty good production. Which one do we push here?
Left button.
The left button. And whenever we had water, there's probably not a better place to farm than right here. We've got good soil, not as good as it was because of the Dust Bowl, but we could make a lot of crop. You can put a lot of water and fertilizer and you can make a lot of crop. And we had lots of water and we knew how to make a crop and we could farm. But those days have changed. These are a couple of my wells. As you can see, we're running 2-inch pipe into 8-inch pipe into the discharge. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. And that's really what I want to talk about and address today is that change from irrigated to dry land and why it is so difficult for us to make. Guys been dryland farmers, you don't understand this, but if you've been an irrigated farmer and you're going to dry land, it's hard. I've got this well. I really like this one. You can see I used to have there on the left, I used to have an 8-inch pipe, then I had a 4-inch well, now I've got a 2-inch well. It's not going back to a 4 or an 8. It's not going to get any better. You know that, and I know that. That's the reality that we're living with, and so how do we live with that? This is a farm that's been in my family since the Dust Bowl. That's actually my house right up in the center in the middle, so this is home for me. This farm is 1,050 acres. And in 1993, I put these pivots on this farm. There's a half mile there on the right, and that was actually a towable 10 tower I had on the left over there on the west side. When we put those pivots up, the biggest discussion we had was how are we going to water the corners? Because we expected every acre to be productive and make us money. And we spent hours and hours talking about how are we going to water these corners. We're going to have to dry land. They aren't going to be productive. What are we going to do? Well, we solved that problem. This is about what I'm watering now, about 150, 160 acres of what I'm doing on this farm. I've sold the pivot off there on the west side. Shorten the towers, and whenever we go to conferences and we talk to people, all we want to talk about is that little part that we irrigate, because that's what's fun, We don't want to talk about all this other stuff because it's just not as much fun, To grow, 4 bale cotton and 250 bushel corn, those were some, that was pretty cool times. We don't have that choice anymore. We've got to learn to adjust of what we're doing, adjust our expectations. And actually on this farm and on a couple of others, the NRCS has a program called the Conservation Crop Rotation, irrigated to dry land conversion, and I'm actually having an application in to go ahead and convert this to dry land. NRCS has a 5-year payment to do that. And I think NRCS has a booth back here. You really ought to, if you have an interest in it, to visit with them. A couple of the reasons I'm interested in doing that In 5 years, I'm not going to be watering 160 acres. That's going to continue to decline. Also, I'm farming that in a circle, and I go to a lot of work just for that bit of irrigation, and it really messes up your efficiency. You're really not near as efficient as if I could run those rows straight. And then also, there's only one way to really save water, and that's really to cut the wells off. If we're really interested in saving, and by having that payment, that really encourages me to do that. That doesn't work for everybody, but it certainly worked in my program, and I'm excited about it. This is the change in irrigated acres. I believe this is 97 to 2017. And each dot's a 1,000-acre decrease, red dot. And you can look at right here on the high plains in West Texas where we are. There's a lot of red dots. And we know that. I'm not telling you anything that we don't know. Our irrigated acres are continuing to decline. So what do we do about it? This is data from the High Plains Underground Water District, the number of new wells we're drilling every year. We keep drilling more and more and more wells, and yet we have less and less and less irrigated acres. And I'm not going to be critical. I have done the same thing. And the experience that I had on my farm, you don't want to nozzle your pivot down. So you go drill a couple more wells, and you keep your pivot kind of nozzled up. Then about 3 years later, you're right back where you were to begin with. And you really didn't gain anything. That's a short-term solution to a long-term problem. It can mask it for a while, but it's not solving our problem. Will this video play? No. Okay. I don't know how many of y'all are Ted Lasso fans. I really enjoyed watching Ted Lasso, and this is the dart scene, and he talks about how people have underestimated him his entire life. That people would look at what he was doing and they'd be judgmental. And he talks about he was driving along and he saw a quote. Ready to go? Can we advance? There we go. Saw a quote. Be curious, not judgmental. And the reason this strikes a chord with me is I started no-tilling in 1995. That was before we had GMO and Roundup Ready crop. And every careless weed in the county come up with my cotton. It was one of those old cold, damp springs. So I sprayed, I had an airplane because it was muddy. I had an airplane spray MSMA over the top of my cotton. You know what MSMA does over the top of sick cotton? And I say, God smiled upon me though. He sent a hailstorm and he wiped it out, thank goodness. It was a wreck. Total, nothing good about it. So I did what any logical person would do. I did more the next year, right? But we did get Roundup Ready cotton, and that was a total game changer. It totally changed the way I farm. But what I learned also is people judged me for what I did. They didn't say, Barry, why are you doing that? Barry, why are you pre-watering those milo stalks? You want them to grow again? People said the guy's lost his mind. It might have been right, but people want to judge instead of asking questions. And we're bad about that. Whenever people want to do different things and try different things instead of saying, why are you doing that? Maybe we need to ask those questions and we might just learn something. This adjustment, like I said, when you've been an irrigated farmer and you're going to be a dryland farmer, it's hard. It's a difficult transition. And part of it goes back when I showed that pivot, we want to water the corners. We want to water all of it. When we have lots of water, you can put water and fertilizer on every acre and you can make a lot of crop. It's a lot of fun to do that. We can't do that anymore. We've got to change our mindset on how we make a living, how we make money without trying to force every acre to be productive. This is a production function curve. I went to school here at West Texas and I learned to love graphs and charts. That tells you something about me probably. But this is a production function curve, and on the left, on the vertical axis, is our yield increase, and on our horizontal axis is our inputs, which is basically water. When you got lots of water and fertilizer, you want to be yielding right up at that top. That's fun to do. And in fact, I was trying to think about how this adjustment is so hard, and I got a magazine in the mail just yesterday, and here's the big ad on the back, bragging rights available in 220,000 count bags and a beautiful, beautiful field of cotton. Because that's what we like to do. We like to produce up in that very top area. And if you've got enough inputs, you can do that. But we don't have that choice anymore. Our water's gone. And so you've got to move back down this curve to what's realistic for our yield goal of what we can do. We need to change what our idea of success is. In the high plains of Texas, on dryland cotton, we typically harvest 3 out of 10 crops. What if we harvest 8 out of 10 crops by using crop rotation and some of these conservation methods, taking some land and not trying to make every acre productive, but trying to make it our whole farm profitable, and not every acre profitable, but the farm profitable. And to look at some crop rotations. Every acre is not going to be a maximum deal anymore. You've got to change that mindset to make the whole farm productive. And it changes the way you think. When you put out water and fertilizer and make a crop, it don't take a lot of faith to do that. When you're counting on rainfall and capturing rainfall, you have to have some faith that you're going to make it. You've got to be in tune with nature, in tune with your land, making your soil better. It changes your mindset, and it's kind of a freeing mindset. And we realize what our Creator has done for giving us, and we need to utilize that to our advantage. One other point on this chart is, if you'll notice on the left side, that trend increases. Each increase in input on your lower yields, it increases pretty rapid. As you get up on making higher yields, that starts declining. That works for our advantage. When you're not trying to push those big yields, it's really easier to make those others for a lot less cost. Get The two mistakes people make, on this dry land conversion, we just want to pour stuff to it and spend money, or we say, oh, it's dry land crop, I can't spend any money. You really have to think about each input and what we're doing on our inputs. You can't save your way to prosperity. You can't spend your way to prosperity. You've really got to look at every input and say, am I getting a marginal return on that? And after the video, I want to point this picture out. That's my granddad, the second one from the left. That's my great aunt on the left and two of my great uncles on the right. It's taken back in the 20s. And after watching that film, I'm grateful for what we have and what they've gone through. And I do want to point out, when we talk about that film, we cannot allow a dust bowl like that to happen again. And we have the technology to prevent it. The question is, do we have the will to do that? Another adjustment whenever we aren't growing as much crop, is we aren't creating as much revenue. If you're not irrigating the crop as much as you used to, you're not creating that same revenue. And we get into this mindset that we have to create the same amount of revenue. And what I'll challenge you is maybe you need to be looking at your overhead cost and your fixed cost. If you're not irrigating as much, you don't need as much fixed cost. And you really need to analyze if you need the same system that you have with irrigation. And you've got to change that mindset. Once you're used to cash flowing so much money, it's hard to change. So what do? You say, oh man, I've got to cash flow this same amount of money. I need the same amount of revenue. Got to get some more land. Well, you get some more land, you got to get some more equipment. We get some more equipment, we got to borrow some more money. We got to borrow some more money, we got to get some more help. Oh my gosh. We just get on this treadmill. And we've talked a lot about stress on the farm. And I'll tell you people, we create a lot of that stress ourselves. Thinking that we have to be on that treadmill and to do this and do that. And actually whenever I got in my pickup to come up here, we had, this great snow. And I got to thinking about whenever you drive on the ice, or in the mud, we all know people that get stuck in the mud and the first thing they get, gas it, spin those wheels, and while they do, they go nowhere, do they? Sometimes you got to let your foot off the gas before you can get out of the mud or get out of the ice and to go, just giving her the gas might not always be the answer. Maybe we need to rethink about our whole operation. It's a different operation. It's a different paradigm. And we need to rethink what we're doing. It ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that this ain't so. And it's what you know for sure that this ain't so. And another chart, like I said, I like charts. This is a long run average cost curve. And it talks about farm size. And it's basically farm size on the bottom where it says quantity. And on the left side, our axis is a unit cost. That's cost per unit of production, not per acre, per unit. How many cents a pound does it cost to grow cotton? How many dollars a bushel does it cost to grow wheat? And we know we have to be at a certain size to be efficient. You can't grow 80 acres and be efficient. We know that. And that size varies. It varies by person, a lot, by farms. But what we know that just ain't so is we just assume that the larger we get, this line on the left just keeps going down, and we get the more and more we produce, the more efficient we are. And that's not the case. That line flattens out at the bottom. And there is a point that we reach maximum efficiency. that line does not continue to decline. And that is such an important factor because it's one of those things, like I said, we know that this ain't so. And there is a point, and like I said, and this will vary by people and by farms, when you actually start going the other way on efficiencies. You're not getting stuff done timely, you got too stretched out, and you can actually go the other way on your efficiency. So just thinking that more acres are going to solve your problems, not going to do it. Maybe we need to take those acres and do better with them. And I do want to point out, like I said, this is home for me. I know the area, been here a while. This black line's the 100th meridian, which is basically the east side of the Texas Panhandle. West of that line, the Great Plains that we looked at in that video, this is a tough place to farm. There is no doubt. Without water. If you got water, it's fun. Without it, it's hard. And this is a pan evaporation rate. And even though, you draw that 100th meridian line again, we get about the same rain as North Dakota, but our pan evaporation rate is twice what theirs is. Rain doesn't go as far or last as long. This is a tough place to farm. There's no doubt. So how do we deal with that? Don't be a tourist. There's a friend of mine from North Dakota pointed this out to me. He said, when you live in North Dakota and it's 15 below and the wind's blowing, don't whine. It's North Dakota. It's supposed to be cold and windy. Well, it's kind of the same way here in West Texas. It's too dry here a whole lot more than it's too wet. We know that. We need to take that into our cropping patterns and our crop rotations. How do we capture that rain that falls? How do we armor our soil to protect it from the wind? How do we build residue to capture rainfall when it comes? How can we make this land productive? And it's hard, and it's different than North Dakota, it's different than Indiana. We have to capture the rainfall. We have to look at rotation. We have to look at whatever we can to make money. Because as Steve said, that's what we're doing, is making money. The reason we've done this conference is to challenge conventional thinking, an opportunity for us to come together and share ideas and take them back home and see how we can best manage our farms and ranches. And we transition to a new paradigm without irrigation. Through this conference, you'll hear some things you agree with, you don't agree with, but I'll just challenge you to be curious and ask questions. Some things might work for you, some things won't. Can you go back one slide? This is a verse from Hebrews 6, 7, and 8. For land that has drunk the rain that often falls on it, and produces a crop useful to those for whose sake it is cultivated, receives a blessing from God, but if it bears thorns and thistles, it is worthless and near to being cursed. We are commanded to care for our land, to cultivate it and to care for it. And one thing I want to point out too, it says, from the rain that falls on it and produces a crop. As we transition, when you have lots of irrigation, every crop's a little better than the last one. We can do that. Without irrigation, we can't do that. It says produces a crop, not a bumper crop, just a crop. And we have to change that mindset that, not all my crops are going to be bumper crops. I tell half my crops are below average. And without irrigation, that's the way it is. And we need to be grateful for the crops that we have because you can't force that bountiful crop. But the crop that we have is what we need to accept as our gift from above. If I want to paraphrase this, it's capture rainfall and kill your weeds. That's the short version. I'll close with this slide. The story of family farming underscores a legacy of sustainability. This picture on the left, my dad here he bought that tractor, and that's him holding me on his brand new tractor. On the right side, that's my dad holding my grandson and me and my son on that same tractor. We've been here a while. Saw a picture of my grandparents, my grandson. We're going to be here for a while longer, and we're going to make this as productive as we can. But it's not the same way that my dad did it and my granddad did it. It's different. And I tell people, I say my granddad drilled the wells, Dad pumped the wells, and I've capped the wells. And it's like RN said, the last 40 years, the next 40 years are going to be different from the last 40. And our legacy, we're going to be here and we're going to make it work. So let's see what we can learn today about life beyond the aquifer. Thank you very much.